Investigation began in the early morning hours of March 25th, 2015, when a passerby found the severely injured 18-year-old on Cedar Villa Estates Road on the outskirts of Saskatoon.
Brittany was a very great person. She loved life. She loved living it. She had such a kind heart. She gave everything she could to make other people happy. She did what she could do to make me happy.
This is just a tragic situation where drug and alcohol use exploded. My client had some very deep-seated personal issues that she was not dealing with, and unfortunately, for whatever reason, we'll never know.
Saskatchewan, Canada. A man walking near a landfill close to a residential area on the southern edge of Saskatoon made an urgent call to 911. He had come across a young woman lying on the ground. She was cold to the touch, and there were marks around her neck, clear signs of violence. There was blood on the hood of her black leather jacket. She wasn't wearing any shoes, and her watch was shattered. It was obvious, that there had been a brutal struggle. Law enforcement arrived quickly, but there were no signs of life, and she was pronounced dead right there at the scene. It became clear almost immediately that this was a homicide. The only item found nearby was a dark blue belt with a large buckle. Other than that, the area was empty and eerily quiet. She had nothing on her that could help identify her, so police released images of her clothing and distinctive tattoos, including, a large lion tattoo on her back. It didn't take long before a teenage girl named Cheyenne called in. She was sobbing and said the tattoos matched those of her best friend, Brittany Gargle. They had been together the night before, but they went their separate ways in the early morning hours, and she hadn't seen her since. More calls came in, all naming the same person, and soon it became painfully clear that the young woman was Brittany.
The investigation began in the early morning hours of March 25th, 2015, when a passerby found the severely injured 18-year-old on Cedar Villa Estates Road on the outskirts of Saskatoon.
18-year-old Brittany Gargle had lived her entire life in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, a quiet Canadian city stretched along the banks of the South Saskatchewan River, where life moves kind of slow and steady. It's a place with lots of bridges, wide green riverbanks, and this constant sense of open space, like the city is always breathing freely, During the day, the streets are filled with students and doctors going about their routines. Then in the evening, everything settles down. It gets calm and quiet, with people taking slow walks by the river and streetlights reflecting softly on the water. Winters there are harsh, no doubt about it, but the summers are warm and long, and that's when Saskatoon really shows its true, cozy side. This was the city she grew up in, the neighborhoods she recognized, the streets she knew by heart, and the people who had always been around. It was familiar, comfortable, and just felt like home, honestly. So, where are you watching this video from, and what time is it for you right now? I'm honestly really curious to know where my audience is tuning in from. And while you're typing that in, I'm going to keep going. Her family was big and loud, and after her parents divorced when she was still a kid, it somehow became even bigger and more complicated. Brittany kind of had to grow up fast, taking on way more responsibility than most people her age, She had 4 younger sisters who truly admired her. They looked up to her, copied the way she acted, the things she said, the choices she made. To them, she wasn't just the older sister. She was, their guide, the person they measured themselves against. Not long ago, Brittany had reconnected with her biological father after several years of having absolutely no contact. That decision wasn't easy for her emotionally. Not at all, but it mattered a lot. From their very first meetings, it was clear that the connection between them was still there. It hadn't disappeared with time. They quickly found their rhythm again, talking a lot, laughing, and slowly spending more and more time together. For Brittany, it honestly felt like getting something back that she thought she'd lost. Her friends remembered her as someone who was very straightforward, like she never hid what she was thinking. Brittany spoke honestly, sometimes a bit sharp, but always real. She had this adventurous side to her, always chasing movement and adrenaline. She loved snowboarding, going out on boats, and camping trips. Freedom mattered to her. So did changing scenery and actually feeling something. You know, that raw emotion. She got excited easily and had this way of lighting up everyone around her just as fast. Her sense of humor was bold, sometimes cutting, and that's exactly what drew people in. There was almost always someone around Brittany, friends, acquaintances, whole groups that just wanted to be near her, like spend time in her orbit. But beneath that easygoing surface, her life was packed with responsibility. Brittany was incredibly busy. She had recently gone back to school after realizing she wanted to change her future. At the same time, she was saving money by working 2 jobs, often without days off, and barely any rest. She had a clear plan laid out in her head: finish school, go to college, study business, and eventually move into the hospitality industry. For her, this wasn't just a dream, it was a real, thought-through path. Meanwhile, investigators were carefully piecing together the events of the previous day. Every detail mattered. Every gap in time meant something. They already knew that Brittany hadn't been home that night, and that fact alone narrowed the time frame of her death significantly. That evening quickly became the key focus of the investigation. The first person from Brittany's circle to come forward was her close friend Natasha. They had been friends for years, and their relationship was deep and trusting. Natasha said Brittany often came to her for advice, especially during tough moments. It was actually Natasha who encouraged her to go back to school and take her education seriously after learning that Brittany had dropped out earlier. Their conversations were open, sometimes heavy, but always honest, the kind of talks that really stay with you. Natasha lent her a little money for gas and asked what her plans were. Brittany said she was meeting up with a few friends and might end up going to a party. Natasha hugged her goodbye and said,
"All right, girl, I'll see you soon."
But after that, she never heard from her again.
Look at the facts, accept what happens, and really hope for the best. Best outcome for the family and the friends. And just knowing that she's not suffering anymore and in a better place, I think is a good thing. And that she's probably in a better place than where this world is today. It's scary out there. Can't even go over to a house party, can't go out anywhere without something happening, especially in this city. In my eyes, the city's become a thug town, and you have to be very careful at what you do and where you go. And this is one lesson. Unfortunately, it's a hard lesson, but it's a lesson to show, like, tell the world, like, look, you really need to be careful out there. This could be anybody.
The next person to give a statement was the one Brittany had been drinking with that night, her best friend of many years, Cheyenne. Their bond was close and deep, something that didn't form overnight. They grew especially close after Brittany learned about Cheyenne's difficult childhood and her rough teenage years. Brittany became more than just a friend to her. She was real support, someone who listened, who showed up, who didn't walk away when things got hard. You know, over time, they became almost inseparable, spending most of their free time together. Going out for drinks was just a normal part of their routine, like something they did without even thinking about it. That night, everything really started just after midnight. Brittany posted a selfie of the two of them together, an image that looked carefree, almost innocent, with absolutely no hint of the tragedy ahead. The photo was taken right before they left the house, and later it became one of the very last captured moments of that night. Cheyenne told police they went to several places together, driving around in Brittany's car. The night unfolded slowly, kind of organically, without any real plan. First, they stopped by Manchester's brew pub. Then they ended up at a house party. After that, they drove clear across the city to Colonial Pub and Grill, bouncing from one place to the next. According to Cheyenne, the house party was heavy. The atmosphere got overwhelming pretty fast, and after they left, the rest of the night started to blur for her. Some moments felt erased, others kind of melted together. She only vaguely remembered that once they were at Colonial Pub and Grill, something unsettling happened, something that later made her worry that this moment might be connected to what happened to Brittany. It wasn't a clear memory, more like a feeling that stuck with her. At the bar, Brittany started talking to a man she didn't know. From the outside, it looked like there was some chemistry like flirting, the kind you'd expect late at night with alcohol in the mix. Brittany asked him for a lighter and invited him to drink with them, acting confident and open, just like she always did. But before Cheyenne really had a chance to look at him, or remember his face, Brittany and the man left together. It happened fast, with no explanation. Brittany didn't say where they were going. Cheyenne didn't know his name and didn't even see which direction they headed, whether they walked away or left in Brittany's car. Her memory was left in fragments. The only things Cheyenne could say for sure were that the man was white and that it was around 4 a.m. One strange detail stood out too. For some reason, Brittany had Cheyenne's phone with her. After that, Cheyenne went to her uncle's place. She arrived alone, without Brittany, and later her uncle confirmed to police that Cheyenne had come by herself. That detail helped lock in the timeline of the night, and only made the emptiness between the moment they separated and what happened next feel even heavier.
Where are you? I haven't heard anything from you. I really hope you made it home safe. Love you.
Police needed to find this mysterious man, but they were working with almost nothing. The description was fragmented, memories were blurry, and his name was completely unknown. The exact location where Brittany's car was found was never fully confirmed, but when the vehicle was eventually located, it looked abandoned in a way that felt unsettling. You know, just wrong. The car was coated in a layer of dust and dirt, like it hadn't moved for a while. There were dark stains along the side that immediately raised questions, and long grass was tangled in the tires, suggesting the vehicle had gone off the road, or had been sitting somewhere beyond the pavement. Inside the car, officers found Cheyenne's phone. That detail suddenly carried a lot of weight. It seemed to back up Cheyenne's account that Brittany really did take her phone when she left with the unknown man, and that, in turn, pushed investigators toward the idea that Brittany and the man may have driven somewhere together, instead of leaving on foot, like they had initially assumed. Every small detail like this shifted the direction of the investigation, but even then, it still didn't bring them any closer to clear answers. Detectives reviewed the surveillance footage from Colonial Pub and Grill, hoping to catch even the smallest visual clue. But what they found was disappointing. Neither Cheyenne nor Brittany appeared on the video at all. That felt strange and didn't line up with the witness statements. Bar staff also couldn't recall seeing the two girls that night. At the same time, employees stressed that the place was packed, loud, and chaotic, so a lot of people could have easily blended into the crowd. Investigators didn't rule out the possibility that Cheyenne might have been mistaken about the timing or even about the exact location. The phone belonging to Cheyenne, found inside Brittany's car, became one of the key pieces of evidence. Detectives were really counting on it, believing the data could help retrace Brittany's movements that night and fill in the gaps in her friend's account. Location data showed a signal near a McDonald's at around 4:30 a.m. Cheyenne had never mentioned that. And yeah, that raised some serious questions. Had Brittany stopped there after leaving the bar? And if she did, who was she with at that moment? Not long after, the autopsy results for Brittany came in. They confirmed investigators' worst fears. The cause of death was strangulation. At that point, law enforcement had almost no doubt left the belt found near her body was the murder weapon. That conclusion shut down any remaining alternative theories and firmly placed the case into the category of intentional homicide. Detectives kept coming back to Cheyenne's words, over and over again, trying to shape them into a clear, logical picture. They broke her account down minute by minute, lining it up with technical data, security cameras, and statements from other people. And still, deep down, there was this unsettling feeling they just couldn't shake. Something about the story didn't sit right. Sure, alcohol could explain some of the confusion. It can blur memories, mess with timing, make moments blend together, but there were too many gaps. Way too many things didn't line up, especially when it came to Colonial Pub and Grill, the place Cheyenne insisted they had definitely been, and where Brittany supposedly met that mysterious stranger. The problem was, so far, not a single confirmed fact showed that they had ever even been there that night. Time kept passing. Outside, it was already fall colder, darker, the silence stretching longer, the days getting shorter. But the investigation was basically stuck in the exact same place it had been back in March. In all those months, no answers surfaced that moved the case any closer to resolution. People were still in shock, still struggling to believe that something like this could even happen. Brittany's name kept coming up in conversations, and more makeshift memorials appeared around the city, candles, flowers, heartfelt posts on social media. One of those posts stood out in particular. It was an emotional message from Cheyenne, and because of how close the two had been, it drew a lot of attention. That was one of the reasons investigators decided to speak with Cheyenne's uncle again. This time, his demeanor was completely different. He was visibly nervous, dodging direct questions, clearly not wanting to go back to that night. But after enough persistent questioning, he suddenly started saying more than he ever had before. He told police that Cheyenne had shared a very different version of events with him. According to her, that morning they had supposedly met two men at a bar and gone with them to a motel. The only detail she could give was that the men were black. This directly contradicted her earlier statement, where she had claimed Brittany was talking to a white man. She couldn't provide names, couldn't describe what they were wearing, and couldn't even say where the motel was located. Cheyenne said that everyone in the motel room had been using marijuana. The atmosphere was chaotic and tense, and she claimed an argument broke out over cocaine. She told her uncle that at some point she went into the bathroom, and when she came back out, what she saw was horrifying. Brittany was lying on the bed, and there were clear marks around her neck, like from a rope. Cheyenne told him that the two men pointed a gun at her and forced her to help cover up what they had done, threatening her into silence. For a lot of reasons, investigators didn't believe this story. It was inconsistent, full of contradictions, and backed by absolutely no evidence. But at the same time, there was something deeply important about it. Cheyenne had essentially admitted that she knew Brittany had been murdered before she ever called police to identify the body. She mentioned specific details, including marks on Brittany's neck that no random person could have known. In doing so, she placed herself directly at the scene. The broader context only deepened suspicion. Cheyenne had a long criminal history, more than 50 prior convictions, starting when she was just 12 years old. At that point, she was already in custody for another offense, so questioning her wasn't difficult, but her behavior had changed completely. The once open, friendly, compassionate friend who had been cooperative with investigators was now quiet, closed off, and evasive. Her answers were short, vague, and she offered nothing new or useful. Detectives were left with no real choice but to step back. More than a year passed. Police hit a dead end. It felt like every possible witness had been spoken to, every lead exhausted. Most surveillance footage had long since been erased due to limited storage times, and even when it existed, it never produced results. No one remembered anything new, no one had anything left to add. The case slipped into silence, leaving behind nothing but questions and no answers at all.
Brittany was a very great person. She loved life, she loved living it, she had such a kind heart. She gave everything she could to make other people happy. She did what she could do to make me happy. She wanted to finish school and open her own business and do everything she could to be successful. And then life was taken from her and she's no longer with us, but when I'm here, I can still feel her presence. And it's almost like she's telling me, Nikki, it's okay. I'll meet you again. We'll be together again. I'm in God's hands. I'm safe. And I just got to remember her for the person she was.
Police were left with just one possible suspect, Cheyenne. Investigators kept combing through Brittany's and Cheyenne's social media pages, carefully reading every comment and every message, hoping that something obvious had been right there in front of them the whole time. And eventually, they noticed something incredibly important. In a memorial post Cheyenne had shared, the upper part of the girl's clothing was clearly visible. That's when investigators spotted something that made them stop cold. Cheyenne was wearing a belt, one they recognized instantly. It was the very same belt found near Brittany's body, the one they now believed had been used as the murder weapon. The marks on Brittany's neck matched the distinctive weave of that belt exactly. Police also stated that the stains found on Brittany's car were consistent with marks that belt could have left behind. With this new information, the belt was sent off for more advanced DNA testing. The results showed DNA belonging to both Cheyenne and Brittany. Investigators were honestly stunned. They realized that if that photo had been taken from even a slightly different angle, this critical piece of evidence might never have been linked to Cheyenne at all. Even so, building the case was still incredibly difficult. There was no clear motive, and Cheyenne wasn't talking. Not a word. Months slowly turned into years. Time kept moving, but the case stayed frozen, almost like it was fading into the background, headed toward being forgotten. And then, finally, A break came from someone who had never spoken to police before and had never been on investigators' radar. A friend of Cheyenne's unexpectedly went to Brittany's parents, carrying a story that made your stomach drop. She spoke carefully, but every word felt heavy, unsettling. According to her, Cheyenne showed up at her house that same morning, sometime after 5 a.m. She was extremely intoxicated, emotionally shattered, and completely hysterical. The friend said it looked like a sudden, uncontrollable emotional collapse, fueled by alcohol. Cheyenne was shaking, couldn't organize her thoughts, and spoke in broken fragments, like she was forcing the words out. Cheyenne told her that she and Brittany had gotten into what she described as a serious argument. She mentioned that it started over a cell phone, but she didn't explain further. Crying, gasping through panic and fear, Cheyenne said she hit Brittany and then strangled her to death with her own belt. The confession came out suddenly, all at once, like she couldn't hold it in any longer. Then she pointed outside. When the friend looked out the window, she saw Brittany's car parked there. Inside the vehicle, near the passenger window, Brittany was sitting slumped over, motionless, with visible blood, even in the dim, early morning light. Cheyenne didn't say anything else. She didn't explain how the fight started, what pushed it that far, or how it turned deadly. She never mentioned any other people, no motel, no outside circumstances. Her words were chaotic, but at the same time painfully direct. The friend was so shocked by what she'd seen and heard that the only thing she could do was tell Cheyenne to leave immediately. Without hesitation, Cheyenne went back to Brittany's car and, still heavily intoxicated, drove off. The next morning, once Cheyenne had sobered up, that same friend said Cheyenne claimed she remembered nothing from the night before. She insisted there was a complete blackout, that everything had been wiped from her memory. The friend was too frightened to go to police right away. Fear, shock, and confusion about what she had just been pulled into completely paralyzed her. Only with time, when carrying that secret became unbearable, did she finally share what she knew with Brittany's family. Later, even more came out. Cheyenne's uncle admitted that she had asked him to support her version of events and help cover for her. He confessed that he had provided her with several false alibis. Police concluded that Cheyenne had deliberately manipulated the story, inventing random people involving her uncle, posting false information on Facebook, and avoiding
Partying and drinking began with these two friends posing for this Facebook photo. It ended in tragedy, with Brittany Gargle's body found on this stretch of rural road outside of Saskatoon. At first, police didn't have much to go on. They didn't even really know who Gargle was. But this photo proved instrumental.
Cheyenne Antoine wore a baggy hooded jacket during the proceedings, at times using the long sleeves to cover her face. The 20-year-old is charged with second-degree murder in the death of Brittany Gargle. The victim's family and friends wept in the courtroom as the charges were read.
We're so grateful, and so thankful that the investigators that have been working on this for almost 2 years never gave up hope, because it was very hard for us at times to keep that hope up. Yeah, the details are not going to be pretty. I'm raising her 7-year-old sister who has a lot of questions and doesn't understand, so that's difficult. Brittany was very happy, joyful. She loved her family. She has 4 younger sisters. She loved her friends. She spent as much time with them as she could. She was a wonderful person whose life was cut short, and it's not fair.
Nearly 6 months later, the accused commented on the post, recounting a dream she had of the deceased teen, saying in part, "Woke up with tears in my eyes. I'm blessed to have met you and have you be a part of my life." Antoine's message concludes with, "Rest in paradise, my angel." Along with the murder charge, the former friend is accused of causing an indignity to a body. Antoine has several outstanding court matters, recently being found guilty of assault and uttering threats in a December incident. Meanwhile, Gargle's family is remembering her as a happy grade 12 student who loved her 4 younger sisters. When Antoine's appearance concluded, she put her hood up and walked out of the prisoner's box. She will remain in custody and is due back in court Friday. Ryan Kessler, Global News.
With the evidence stacked against her, Cheyenne eventually gave investigators the same version of events she had shared with her friend that morning. According to her, That night involved a lot of drinking and smoking, and the atmosphere slowly became more and more chaotic. She claimed that after the house party, her memory started to drop out, like things went fuzzy. Moments lost their clarity, and parts of the night blended together. Cheyenne said she only vaguely remembered stopping at McDonald's, where an argument between her and Brittany supposedly broke out. She couldn't clearly explain what started it. She just kept saying the tension between them escalated fast. After that, according to her, they left on foot, and that's when Brittany took her phone. She repeated again and again that she couldn't really remember how everything unfolded. She talked about a sudden, uncontrollable burst of rage, saying she was overwhelmed with anger and completely snapped. In her account, that moment felt fragmented and blurred. She described it like everything around her just fell into darkness, and then suddenly she realized Brittany was lying on the ground, unconscious. She didn't provide further details, constantly returning to the same explanation that there were gaps in her memory and that large parts of what happened were simply gone. At 21 years old, Cheyenne stood in court for the first time. Inside the courtroom, she saw Brittany's family, the people who had lost a daughter, a sister, the one who held so much together. Cheyenne lowered her head, covering her face with her hands. She was crying, shaking with emotion, never once lifting her eyes, avoiding any kind of eye contact. The atmosphere in the courtroom was heavy and tense, filled with a quiet, almost suffocating kind of pain. Under Canadian law, second-degree murder generally means an intentional killing that wasn't planned in advance, but still doesn't meet the legal standards for first-degree murder. Even so, the punishment is extremely severe. It carries a life sentence, with a mandatory minimum of at least 10 years before parole eligibility. By contrast, manslaughter refers to causing someone's death without a direct intent to kill, even though there may have been an intention to cause harm. Under that charge, there is no mandatory minimum sentence, which gives the court much more flexibility when it comes to determining punishment. Knowing these legal differences, Cheyenne's defense team announced that a plea deal had been reached. She agreed to plead guilty to the lesser charge manslaughter instead of going through a full trial for second-degree murder. Cheyenne said she was taking responsibility for Brittany's death, but at the same time, she insisted that she does not remember the exact fatal moment. Because of that, she argued, the classification as manslaughter was, in her view, the correct and fair outcome. Through her lawyer, she shared words that sounded like an apology, though by then, they could no longer change anything.
I will never be able to forgive myself. Nothing I say or do will ever bring her back. I'm so sorry. This never should have happened.
Her lawyer urged the court to show compassion, pointing to the years of trauma and violence his client had endured. He emphasized that Cheyenne had almost no real relationship with her parents, lost her mother at a very young age, and grew up in a deeply vulnerable environment. Her criminal history began when she was just 12 years old, and by the time she turned 19, she had accumulated 54 convictions, a number that, on its own, spoke to a long and painful history of instability and neglect. According to the defense, Cheyenne's memories of her parents were tied to constant substance abuse. Her lawyer explained that they were trying to numb their own trauma, rooted in Canada's notorious residential school system for Indigenous people. Eventually, Cheyenne was placed in foster care, where she suffered both physical and sexual abuse. The lawyer also told the court that about 1 month before Brittany's death, Cheyenne had been sexually assaulted, an event he claimed dramatically escalated her use of alcohol and drugs. By that point, she had already moved on to much harder substances, including methamphetamine, which only further damaged her mental state. At the same time, many people focused on something else entirely. No matter how horrific Cheyenne's past had been, Brittany was the person who was always there. In hard moments and good ones, she supported her, calmed her down, helped her manage her emotions, and keep herself together. Brittany was the shoulder to cry on, the one person who didn't walk away when others did. She was the only steady presence in Cheyenne's life, the one person she always knew she could turn to, and Brittany would have done absolutely anything for her.
This is just a tragic situation where drug and alcohol use exploded. My client had some very deep-seated personal issues that she was not dealing with, and unfortunately, for whatever reason, we'll never know, they turned into a very tragic situation for all involved.
She knows that Brittany's family desperately wants answers. They want to understand why, to know what exactly triggered it, what moment became the point of no return. But, as Cheyenne's lawyer explained, she can't give them that explanation. Not because she refuses to, at least according to him, but because she herself isn't able to clearly define it. To the family, that didn't sound like an explanation at all. It sounded like yet another empty space, one that will never be filled. They were waiting for meaning, for logic, for a reason, and once again they were left with nothing. From the other side, police and prosecutors emphasized. Cheyenne did mention a cell phone as a possible trigger for the argument, but that's where it stopped. There were no details, no build-up, no explanation of how a normal conflict could have escalated into deadly violence. She didn't add anything more. Investigators were never able to figure out whether she truly doesn't remember the key moments of that night, whether her mind pushed those memories away because they were too traumatic, or whether she's deliberately staying silent, hiding the truth. That answer just hangs in the air, and it probably always will. This case has been left with far more questions than answers, and most likely, that's how it's going to stay forever. No clear motive, no complete explanation, just the reality of a loss that can't be undone, no matter what anyone says now.
I'm just outside Saskatoon Provincial Court here. We have just learned the sentence of a woman who pleaded guilty to causing the death of what court heard was one of her best friends. Brittany Gargle was 18 years old when her body was found just south of Saskatoon near Cedar Villa Estates back in March of 2015. And today, Cheyenne Rose Antoine pleaded guilty to manslaughter in connection to Gargle's death. And the sentence that she received was a joint submission sentence agreed upon by the Crown and Defense. The judge accepting it, meaning that Antoine will serve a 7-year sentence for manslaughter. Now, she was originally charged with second-degree murder, but pleaded guilty to the lesser included offense of manslaughter. And today we learned the facts surrounding this case that was quite mysterious for about 2 years. What she remembers is that they left a house party that night. They were heavily intoxicated, and Antoine says her last memory is of Gargle taking her phone. Cheyenne Antoine actually tried to mislead police in their investigation by saying that she was there that night, but that she had nothing to do with it, that she had left before anything had happened, and kind of tried to almost make it seem like she was looking for her friend as well through Facebook postings. As far as a motive, we just spoke to the defense lawyer who said that this is a case where we will never truly know what caused this woman to kill one of her closest friends, as she just does not remember it happening. However, she does take responsibility for her being the one responsible for this woman's death. At Saskatoon Provincial Court, I'm Bree McAdam with the Saskatoon Star Phoenix.
21-year-old Cheyenne was eventually sentenced to 7 years in prison, with a possible release date sometime in 2024 or 2025. The judge stated that while incarcerated, she would be required to complete programs focused on substance abuse treatment and anger management. Honor your friend's memory by becoming a positive, productive woman. You owe it to her to stand strong and keep going, the judge said. There are still so many questions about what happened that night and why it ever happened at all. One person says she doesn't remember anything, and the other will never be able to say anything ever again.
Gargle's family is still struggling to come to grips with the teen's death. She was a fun-loving, committed young woman who had a good life ahead of her, they say.
Today we learned some details that will help with closure regarding this incident. Brittany was a wonderful young person that didn't deserve this, and we truly deeply miss her every day.
Brittany Czar described the pain of losing her niece as something incredibly dark and crushing, like a weight that never gets lighter, no matter how much time passes. According to her, it's the kind of pain that's always there quietly following you through every single day, showing up even in the most ordinary moments. It's not a sharp, sudden ache. It's more like a constant shadow that settles over your thoughts and never lets you forget exactly who it is you lost. Christy, Brittany's stepmother, spoke about another side of the loss, one that's just as painful. She explained that Brittany's younger sister lives with a constant sense of guilt. The little girl feels guilty if even a single day goes by without thinking about Brittany. For her, remembering isn't just natural anymore, it's become a responsibility, an inner promise she's terrified of breaking. At the time Brittany died, her younger sister was only 5 years old. At that age, it's hard to truly understand death. But what's even harder is the fear of forgetting. She's said that she's scared that if she stops thinking about Brittany, it means she's forgetting her. And to her, that feels like losing Brittany all over again, like she could disappear a second time forever if no one holds on to her memory. Brittany's father, Everett, spoke about his pain quietly, without dramatics, but in his words, you could hear it, that deep, exhausting kind of grief that never really goes away. I feel so much anger and sadness over how short her life was. My life has been changed forever. I miss her so deeply, he said. Those words were simple, with no dramatic phrasing, but that was exactly where their power came from. He wasn't trying to find the right thing to say. He was just telling the truth about a loss he'll have to live with for the rest of his life. Everett also shared one detail that has never left his mind. The day before the murder, he was supposed to help Brittany fix something on her car, but he didn't make it back in time. He said he thinks about that every single day. In his mind, it's not just a broken part, it's a missed chance. Maybe a few more minutes together, one more conversation, one more hug. He lives with the knowledge that the moment was there, and that it was taken from him. This case didn't just leave behind a court ruling. It left shattered lives, memories that still hurt, and empty spaces that will never be filled. For Brittany's family, time didn't heal the wounds. It simply taught them how to live with the pain. Thank you so much to everyone who watched. We genuinely hope this story meant something to you and maybe gave you a moment to pause and reflect. If you'd like to support the channel and help us keep creating stories like this, please don't forget to hit like, leave a comment, share the video, and subscribe. Your support truly means a lot to us, and we really appreciate it, honestly.